Hello and welcome. This is Faceless Opinion, escaping the DMZ. Welcome you back to another video. So for today, we're going to be doing something different. I think we are long overdue for a personal story. You heard that right, it's story time in which I, your humble narrator, shall talk about an event that took place in my personal life and tell you, my lovely and beautiful listener. The title speaks for itself, but to explain a little bit before diving deep into it, for the past year, I was in Korea, South Korea, not the other Korea, in which I worked as an English instructor at an after-school academy called a Hagwon. Essentially, I was teaching Korean children English, and let me tell you, I went through a lot while I was there because unlike my other personal stories where I was talking about the jobs I worked, this one is utterly different because this doesn't involve just a job. It involves every facet of my life. I had to move to another country on the other side of the planet, or as my friends called it, I was time traveling, due to me being 14 hours ahead compared to where I was leaving initially. And, as I said, a lot happened in that year. Some good, some bad, and a lot of things in the middle. But I think it's time to begin this therapy session, so I hope you are comfortable. If you want to eat or drink something while listening, go right ahead. Let's begin! Now, before I talk about the job, because that is what the majority of this video will be about, I need to set the scene, build up groundwork, because as you can imagine, living in another country has a massive learning curve. Language is going to be the big thing. I do not know Korean. To be honest, in my time there, I only learned 4 total words. Now, you would think, Faceless, you're going to another country? Why aren't you trying to learn the language? First off, I was only going to be there for a year, so I really don't think it would be worth the time. If I was staying there long term for like many years, then sure, I would take the initiative to learn it. Second reason being, Korean is hard. Look up Hangul and compare it to the English alphabet. Yeah, that is a big ol' no for me. I have a friend who has been learning Korean for over a year, and last I spoke with her, she still has difficulty when it comes to the speaking and listening part of it. Besides, most places do have English translation, and I had a pretty good translator app on my phone. Greatly recommend Papago. Another thing I would say that is a big thing to get used to was relying on public transport, because I don't use public transport where I live, as I have a car and I drive everywhere, or I know someone with a car and we just ride together. Either way, I had to get used to taking buses or subways. Practically the latter, since I always take the subway to get to Seoul, as I primarily resided in a town south of Seoul called Suwon, which, don't get me wrong, is a really nice place, but if you want to have some fun, you go to Seoul. And let's just say, on my travels of the Korean subway lines, I've witnessed some crazy things. Like watching an old man yelling at some young guy who has arm in a sling. I had no idea why this old man was so angry because, they were speaking Korean. But he was chewing this young guy out. The young guy was getting fed up with the old man, but someone calmed him down and he moved into a different subway car. For sure, I thought I was about to watch a subway brawl take place. What else took place? I saw a woman just start angry yelling randomly, and this was at no one in particular because she was by herself and she was not on the phone with anyone because I didn't see a phone in her hand nor AirPods in her ears. No clue what she said because language barrier. Other things. There was a dude who looked homeless sleeping on the subway one time and no one wanted to sit next to him, which understandable. On that same trip, I saw a woman throw up in a shopping bag. And finally, my most interesting encounter, because it happened to me directly. Sometimes the subway gets crowded and gets very packed, so people get smushed together. As a result, I end up feeling a woman touching my ass, and it was no accidental graze. She was filling it up. Not the first time I've been felt up by a woman on Korean public transport. I remember I was taking a buddy of mine, let's call him Marvel Rivals because he's obsessed with playing Marvel Rivals. So me and him, we were going to the fortress in Suwon, and we needed the bus to go there. But it was crowded, so no seats, so we had to stand and grab onto those hanging bars. There was a woman next to me, and she was rubbing her hands against my arm. Sheesh, I know I'm exotic, but ladies, please calm down. I'm just trying to get to my location. What else should I mention? The cost of living. Korea is very cheap. Like, for example, when I had to buy a TV so I could play on my PS5, it cost around 200,000 won, give or take a couple thousand won. And that converted into USD was barely $100. And this was not a crappy TV either. This was a smart TV. Also bought a microwave too for around the same price. Everything is cheap there in comparison to the US. Don't even get me started on the healthcare system. Before I left, I went to do my physical because I'm leaving for a year. I want to make sure that everything is good and I won't have any health issues while I'm gone. Which is sensible. Want to know how much I paid for that? Over $500. And this was for a basic physical, and that is not counting the blood test, which was another $100. Ridiculous. While in Korea, I didn't have to pay for a physical because it is required to do one and is covered because universal health care. And a Korean physical is much more in-depth than an American one. As for the Korean one, you get vision test, hearing test, urine test, blood test, chest x-rays, and for the women, a pelvic exam, but I think that is dependent on something. I don't remember what. I'm a guy, I don't need the pelvic exam. Also, you get free dental check as well, and if you want a cleaning, you do have to pay for that, but as stated before, cost of living is cheap, and I spent less than $10 to get my teeth cleaned. Seriously, the US should consider looking into universal health care, or make it to where basic services don't cost an arm and a leg. Now, final thing before I talk about the job itself, and that will serve as a segue to the topic, and that will be my apartment. As a part of my contract with the academy figures out a place for me to live. All I need to do is pay the utilities, which sounds like a good deal. Though, I'm gonna be honest with you, I hated my apartment. Now, beggars shouldn't be choosers, and that's fair. But I'm gonna be honest with you, I did not like that apartment. Granted, one positive thing I will give it is that compared to other apartments, I would say it's slightly better because it was bigger. I mean, the ones in Seoul are tiny. And for context, about the size of my apartment, it was a bachelor suite, so one big room. Now, what were the issues? I did not really have a kitchen and no space for any appliances for cooking. All I had the space for on my counter was a microwave and a built-in stove that basically looked like a hot plate from a high school science lab. The bathroom was small, and I mean small, particularly the shower. I'm 5'9", or 175 centimeters metric, average height basically, and I felt claustrophobic in that shower. And the shower drain always got clogged, and I always had to clean it out. Granted, I did grow my hair out during that time, but I don't think those showers were designed for people with long curly hair like myself. The floor was pure white. And no matter how many times I cleaned it, I would keep finding hair and dirt specks everywhere, even though I was after cleaned it so thoroughly. The apartment would always get stuffy during the course of the day. Like, to give you an idea of how bad that was, during the winter when it was super cold and snowing, I never once felt the need to turn on the heater because that's how stuffy it was. Summertime is a different story. The AC worked, but it wasn't super efficient at keeping the apartment cool, which is why I always kept the windows open. Speaking of things that didn't work that well, hot water was a rarity. The best I could get was lukewarm. Told the academy about that issue. It never got resolved. My apartment was also the furthest away from everyone because most people lived in the same building or close to one another, and as a result, closer to the academy. Meaning I'm the only one who had to cross 2 crosswalks, while everyone else got one. And it takes a long time for those lights to change. And I'm saying like 4 to 5 minutes on average. And I think the biggest gripe I had with my apartment was when I moved in, I was not the only new instructor, including me, 5 total, and everyone who was moving into their respective places. Previous tenants left behind various items the new instructors got to use, like appliances, pots, pans, furniture, things like that. My place didn't have anything left behind for me except a very disgusting bathroom that needed to be cleaned. I had to buy everything. I didn't even have a bed, as the academy forgot to order one. Everyone else got a bed. I went 3 days without a bed. 3 days! Only would happen to me. Also, I had no Wi-Fi in my apartment either, which is the same with all the other new teachers, but I had to wait a few months before I could even actually get it installed, which was not a fun time at the beginning. So, let's talk about the job. It was alright for what it was. As I mentioned at the start of the video, I worked as an English instructor at an after-school academy. I did that for a year, broken down. It's 4 terms, 1 for each season of the year. The job wasn't exactly hard. It was rather straightforward. The active teaching, I don't exactly have any problem with. Sometimes you might come across the occasional student that causes problems, which will happen, or have a class that you end up dreading to deal with, which is also bound to happen. You just make do with that. Like, I'm not going to sit here and say that, oh, I hated this kid or that kid. I know, I'm a full-grown adult, and I think it's really fucking pathetic for an adult to say that they hate a kid. Now, can some kids be little frickin' shits? Absolutely. The number of times I heard some of the kids talking about Italian brain rot makes me want to jump out a window. But being annoying is not a sufficient reason to hate someone. Dislike? Sure, but not hate. So unless one of the kids I taught murdered my dog or something heinous like that, I'm not gonna say I hate them. They are just young and dumb, something that we have all went through. If anything, I kind of feel bad for a lot of those kids. They don't want to be at the academy. A lot of them hate it there. The only reason they go is because they have to, because their parents make them. To understand what I'm talking about, I need to explain Korean culture. It's very competitive and strenuous. For a lot of these kids, they go to school, then after that they usually go to an after-school academy. And let's just say there are a lot of different academies out there, like English, math, science, music, basketball, fencing. Even jump rope has an academy, which sounds utterly ridiculous said out loud, but that's the truth because one of my female students told me she goes to jump rope academy. I have had to tell her to put her jump rope away a few times. But let's not get sidetracked. So they have to go to an after-school academy or multiple academies back to back, meaning they won't be back home until like the latest being 10 p.m. Keep in mind, we haven't even talked about them doing homework, which they have a lot because they got it from school and all the academies they go to, meaning that they're often staying up late to do it. And the whole cycle repeats itself for the next day, and the next day, and the next day. Which is why some kids, when they come to class, they're either falling asleep or asking for food because they aren't sleeping properly or they don't have time to really eat an actual meal. Now, why would any parent want to subject their child to this routine? Well, that has to do with the test they have to take while they're in high school. I don't remember what is properly called in Korean. If I did, I don't think I can pronounce it right, but I think it's called the CSAT, and this test is the most important test any high schooler will take because it will determine if any of the universities want any of these students based off of their scores. Like, if you are in the top % of the ones taking the test, you have a good chance of going to one of the Sky universities, which is the Korean equivalent of going to an Ivy League school, so like their equivalent of Harvard or something. And going to all these academies are sure to help you get a possible admission, which if you do get admission to, it can help you score a big job working at one of the big corporations across Korea, like Samsung. However, if you don't do that well on the CSAT, your university prospects don't look great, and your future will not be the best, and in most extreme cases, someone might jump off a bridge. From what I heard, I never knew anyone who had done that. Just to preface it, yeah, the education system here is so messed up. One of my students, who was one of my favorites, told me about all the academies and extracurricular activities she has to do. This is what she told me. She told me she has to do English Academy, Math Academy, baseball, piano, and taekwondo. Now, that is a lot, which is why I try to make the lessons more interesting due to my actions and words, which does work as many of the students I had genuinely like me. As in my first term that I started one of my classes, which had low-level kids, a good chunk of them turned into my fan club, and some of them would try to follow me when it was break time. When I go to a teacher's lounge, they would just stand out there and shouting, "Teacher!" trying to get my attention while staring through the window. Felt like I was in a zoo or an aquarium. It was also with this class I'm going to call the terrorists, because the level that they were in was called Terra. I won't explain the breakdown of all the levels as I don't think it's that relevant, but this level in question is a lower level. Well, with them, they would always like to say that I looked like someone or something. This is the list of things that I remember this class in particular calling me. I was called a dinosaur, a bronchiosaurus to be specific, Elon Musk's brother, an anchovy, and egg teacher, though sometimes they would mix it up and call me rotten egg teacher. Though I have been called other things by other classes, like Spider-Man, Demon Teacher, Bruno from Encanto, Mr. Bean. Hell, I was even called Grandma, because my hair reminded them of what a grandma would have, as long curly hair, because these kids were not used to seeing long curly hair. One of my students even asked if I went to a salon, and when I told her it was all natural, she was shocked. Like her mind was blown because she could not comprehend someone having curly hair, particularly a man having curly hair. I had other fan clubs besides the terrorists. I had two others. This next one I will call the Faceless Brigade, because I kid you not, the entire class wanted to use my name randomly. They all wanted to be Faceless Teacher. So we had different versions of Faceless spelled out differently. For example, Faceless with a space in between, Face-less, Faceless but missing an S, etc. But with my actual name. Well, for my other fan club, we'll call them Simps. And we know where this is going, as the girls in that class were low-key obsessed with me, as I would often see a few of them stare at me all doe-eyed or mimicking my physical actions, but the biggest tell of that would be them just unprovoked just saying that I am cute, or handsome, or a pretty boy, with one even saying that I look like Bruno Mars, which I don't. Yeah, some of those students are wild, which makes me recall the time when one of the students pooped on the bathroom floor. And this happened twice. And I'm talking about on the actual floor itself, not on the toilet. Same student too, or at least we think it was. We're not 100% sure who it was, but I think we all decided that was one specific student that did it, and no, it was not one of my students. Sometimes while you are out and about, you might run into a student outside the academy. This happened to me once. It was my favorite student who saw me, and she caught me in an interesting encounter. Should I go into detail about this? Screw it, why not? So for context, this was on a weekend. I was walking around the area, planning to walk around Lake Park as it was a beautiful day. And let's just say, I wasn't alone. I was with someone. A woman. You can tell where this is going. And well, I was caught in 4K. She saw me holding hands with my lady friend, and well, that was talked about quite a bit in that class for the next few weeks, about my girlfriend. Now some of you may ask, Faceless, you want to talk about your lady friend? All I'm gonna say is, no. A gentleman never kisses and tells. What happens in Korea stays in Korea, but it was nice and I enjoyed our time together. Now back to our story. Some students would even draw pictures of me. One even drew a 4-panel comic strip of me fighting against the academy. Many of those students hated the academy. I don't blame them. I hated the academy too. I'll start with the basic stuff before moving to the more extreme things. The classes were way too long. You would have usually 2 classes per day. One is for elementary students, the other is for middle school, with each class being 3 hours long. In which, during those 3 hours, you get 2 5-minute breaks. And there is a 10-minute break between the end of elementary and the start of middle school. So yeah, I don't really get a proper break during the day, which sucks. It really freaking sad that a place like Kroger, which is a literal cesspool, will give you a proper break and this place doesn't. And if you know my history of Kroger, you know it's a big deal. Then on certain days, if you are only teaching one class, you are not able to leave early or come in late. You are required to be there the whole time, unless you requested that time off. So you're stuck there from 2 p.m. until 10 p.m. And you don't teach until your first class is around 4. So 4 is when you start teaching. As those first 2 hours are for prep, which I never really needed if you only teach middle school that day, you are stuck waiting there for 5 hours. Such a massive waste of time. Granted, this does get changed, but like in the final month of my contract, which at that point, why bother? I mean, seriously. But another thing that was a waste of time and really grinds my gears is when it comes to holidays. Because yes, we did have holidays off like Christmas, New Year's Day, and Chuseok, which is Korean Thanksgiving. But the thing is, we had to make those days up, usually on a Saturday. Which at that point, I raised the question, is it really a day off if you have to make it up? and those days blow because there's always going to be that one kid who has to show up for the makeup class. I should know, as that always happened to me. Honestly, I think to myself that these parents must really hate their kid to make them be the only one to show up on a makeup class on a Saturday. No one wants to do that. Personally, I would rather work on a holiday than have to make it up. Not to mention, one thing we also have to do is write student reviews for each and every student you have. I hated doing this because sometimes you'll have a kid who's such an underachiever and lackluster it is borderline impossible to come up with something nice because you are not allowed to be honest, and we don't want to be perceived as mean to the kid. We need to use kind language. Yuck. What a load of crap. Thank God for ChatGPT. All I did was plug in all my notes I had for each student and tell it to write a review that comes off as nice. And before anyone comes at me for using AI, almost all the English instructors were doing it. It was encouraged. Because let me ask you this. Do you want to write? What was the most I had to do for student reviews? I think it was 70. Yeah, 70 of these things. Do you want to do 70 reviews at one given time? Do you want to do all that by scratch? Yeah, I didn't think so. So shut up. But this is just the tip of the iceberg because we haven't gotten to the things that truly make this place bad. First off, there's a lack of consequences when it comes to the problematic students. Now, it shouldn't be any surprise that they're going to be the occasional troublemaker or slacker. There's always that student. And normally when that happens, you normally let the Korean staff handle that, as they are the ones who pull the student out, make calls to the parents, things like that. They essentially work the front desk, and to be frank, they don't do much of anything. Maybe talk to them for like 2 minutes and send them back to class like nothing really happened. And guess what? That kid goes back to causing problems. Sure, sometimes they'll call the parents, but nothing really happens. Like the parents don't care or already know how much of a little shit their kid is and want to force them on someone else. Why bother having children if you aren't going to act like a proper parent? Besides, one thing that gets on my nerves the most is the lack of communication between the Korean staff and the English instructors. For example, let's say you have a student and they are going to be leaving early, and this student goes up to you and tells you, "Teacher, I need to leave early." So you send a message to the desk staff asking, "Hey, so-and-so says they're leaving at 5:30. Can I get confirmation?" Yeah, very rarely they respond to your message, or if they do, it is at a much later time and often had to be asked again for that confirmation. Sometimes they message you something like, "Hey, this student forgot their workbook. Can you make a copy of the pages for today?" Which isn't that big of a deal. That does happen, though I'm not sure why the desk staff are telling me that. The students can and have told me they've forgotten their books before. However, in the case of the desk staff, why are you sending me this message 2 minutes before I have to teach class? At least with the students, they tell me when they see me, which does give me time to make copies, a lot more than 2 minutes, unless it is a case where they came in late. There have been instances where the Korean staff have forgotten to call parents to tell them that their kids have to stay at the academy for progress class, which was detention. The number of angry parents who had to call and yell was numerous, but in that case, I would say it's well deserved. Imagine you are a parent and you don't see your child get off the shuttle and you're wondering, where the hell is my kid? I think there was an incident of that happening, and I think the cops got called, unless I'm mistaken it for something else. This was told to me secondhand. I wasn't there for that, so I can't really give proper details for that. I do know that was a big incident that happened. Yeah, communication between the Korean staff and English instructors was abysmal. Though one thing that does irk me to a minor degree is how little English certain Korean staff members know, with there being one person who knows zero English. Like, why are you working in a place in which another language is being spoken and that many people who you are going to interact and work with only really know that language? Now, I'm not going to expect and demand flawless English skills from anyone while in Korea. That is not the main language. Nor am I really wanting to engage in a personal and detailed conversation with you. But you should have basic understanding and be able to talk in English if you plan to work at an academy that's primary focus is teaching English. Sorry for just getting heated just now. It is one of those things that always bothered me. It would be like me working at the French embassy while not knowing a single word of French except for omelette du fromage. I would not get far in that job, which is a perfect launching pad for my next topic. Let's talk about the boss, the BM, which is short for branch manager. Think of her as the principal, the headmistress, the one in charge of the academy. However, in this instance, BM is not short for branch manager. Instead, we are changing its meaning. It is going to be now Bitchmaster. As for this woman, I do not have anything pleasant to say about her. She is without question the worst boss I have ever had, which is saying something, as I have had my fair share of lousy bosses, managers, and supervisors. Nobody, and I mean literally nobody, liked her, but I shouldn't get too far ahead of myself. With all stories, you start with the beginning. The BM started around the same term I began in, as she was taking over for the previous BM before her. I'm not sure the reason as to why the previous BM was stepping down. I've heard conflicting stories about it, but regardless, a new BM was taking over, that being Bitchmaster. Now in the first term, there weren't any massive changes, as this was a transitional period. New stuff was going to be enacted in the following term. However, people seemed to like her at the beginning, coming off as nice and friendly, as she would buy coffee to all the English instructors, would bring in fruit we can take with us, small gestures like that. I was a bit iffy about this, as I am always a bit suspicious when someone you just meet starts being uber nice to you and starts giving you things, especially when it's a managerial figure doing it. For me, that comes off as buying loyalty or trying to sweeten us up to you. I've never bought up my concerns to anyone because I didn't have any evidence to go off of, just my animal instincts. Then there was also the thought maybe this was a Korea thing, a part of the work culture. Regardless, I was not prepared for what was about to happen. New term starts, and one of the new changes the BM wanted to add was the paper vocab test, which doesn't sound too bad. I mean, the academy already had students do vocab tests on the tablets they use, so no biggie. Even though it does feel redundant to make them do 2 vocab tests over the same material on the same day, but oh my god, this turned into one of the biggest fucking disasters I've ever witnessed, because those paper tests were horrible. The number of students who failed them was extremely high, as they were longer than the normal tablet test. As for those, depending on the level, they range from as low as 8 questions to as high as 20 questions. The average number for the paper test ranged from as low as 15 to as high as 40, maybe even 50 for the highest levels, and there was a time limit for it. 10 minutes, the same amount of time for the tablet test. Only difference being there was no word box or nothing to help them. That first week at the academy when paper tests happened, nothing short of a train wreck. Students were crying, teachers were feeling sorry for them, parents calling the academy wondering what the heck is going on. How did the BM take this? She doubled down on it. Paper tests were still happening. Granted, she did make us retroactively add a word box and hints to the test to make them easier, but that didn't help. That was like putting a band-aid on a gunshot wound. So many issues came up from these cursed paper tests, such as how time-consuming they were, as there were some teachers who could never finish their lessons for that day because not only do we have to hand out the paper test, but we have to go over it in class, document the scores, and that takes time. The BM then came up with the galaxy brain idea to have the Korean staff collect the paper tests, grade them, and give it back to us. Terrible plan. Korean staff were always slow with grading it. Sometimes they forgot to collect them. Oftentimes they would grade it incorrectly, leading to us teachers having to fix it. A lot of teachers got annoyed with the Korean staff, but honestly, I'm going to defend them, which is surprising since I was burying them earlier, as it is not the Korean staff job to collect and grade all these tests. That was not their job to hire to do. Granted, they can't do their normal job properly either, but that's besides the point. No one was happy, especially the students, since there was a massive punishment if they failed the paper test. They would have to stay for progress class and retake the test until they got a passing score. That is some BS, especially given the fact there is no punishment for failing the tablet test. So you have students staying for over an hour longer at the academy to retake the test. Again and again and again and again and again. Because apparently the paper test, made by a woman who is more stubborn than a mule, was so damn important that it surpasses the company's actual curriculum that all the academies have to follow. Like, over the next 2 following terms, paper tests would be overhauled and were nowhere near as bad as their starting iteration, but the damage was done. I'll explain that a little bit later, but let's talk about the BM's other quirks. She was stubborn, as she was a my way or the highway type of person who does not compromise. She was very flippant in her choices. One day she would decide this, then on the next day she would be like, no, I don't want to do it that way, let's do it another way. She was not good at communicating, as she would wait to the last minute to tell us something and give us no time to do it. For example, the following term, after the paper tests were introduced, she never told anyone we were doing them again, unlike the second week of the new term, and told us we were doing paper tests. Those tests took weeks of time to prepare, and she told us we were doing paper tests that day, and class started in 30 minutes. She was unprofessional, as she never followed dress code. I want you to do me a favor. I want you to close your eyes and picture how a boss should dress. I'll give you a few seconds. Okay, now allow me to describe to you how the BM dressed. Gym shorts, and I'm talking the short gym shorts, flip-flops, and a t-shirt that says, and I'm not making this up, Devil Kids. I bet you weren't expecting that, now were you? She is also a liar, as she stated she worked 6 days a week for 15 hours each day, which is another lie because she just came back from a vacation and has been several times before and after where she has not been present at the academy. She is also very shady, as she tried to screw someone over. Let's call him Birdman because he played a Birdman in my D&D game. So Birdman was supposed to do something called camp, and this takes place during the summer and winter, in which you teach extra classes because students will not be in school. A few days before camp starts, BM tells Birdman that he won't be getting paid for camp because of some BS reason involving his hours or something. However, she was willing to pay him out of pocket if he would resign to the academy for another year. That's extortion. He didn't agree to that, but he ended up getting his money after contacting HR about it, so good for Birdman. How else can I describe the BM? She's disrespectful, as the biggest person who took the brunt of her crap was my supervisor. Let's call her Migraine, because she is dealing with a lot of migraines. She is the middle woman between the English instructors and the BM, and she would get into so many arguments with her about everything. Over time, it wore her out. She was always stressed. She was overworked greatly. BM would always message her with things to do, even during times when she is not working. It got so bad that Migraine came close to doing a midnight run, which means that she was prepared to just leave the country, never come back, ditching this job. She didn't end up doing it, but if she did, I wouldn't blame her. I feel so bad for her and everything she went through because of the BM, which now leads to the BM's worst crime. And it was an actual crime. For context, she wanted to add in a writing workbook for students in the lower levels to have to do, which the parents would have to pay for them. Apparently, she stole this idea from a rivaling academy company that did the exact same thing, which is copyright infringement, and can lead to someone going into jail, which I did not actually know, but apparently that's a thing that can happen. When the company found out those writing workbooks were no longer going to be used, honestly, she should have gotten fired for that, or at the bare minimum, get suspended. Neither happened, just a slap on the wrist, and told her not to do that again, which is why I blame the company for not all but the BM's actions, but all the ones following this incident. They are culpable for keeping that woman in her position of power. I mean, yes, they did start to have more oversight in the last few months I was there, but who cares? Let me tell you something, some wisdom. HR is not here to help the employees, it is here to help the company. BM did a lot of damage to the academy. Everyone hated her, from the English instructors, the Korean staff, the students, and the parents. They all hated her. It takes a certain type of skill to be that hated. For English instructors, no one renewed contracts and have all left. You had people who worked there for 2, 3, 4 years decide to leave. Personally, I don't understand why anyone would want to stay there for as long as they did. Things weren't great before she was a thing, but that's just my opinion. The Korean staff all quit and had to be replaced with all new people. So many students quit the academy. I don't know the exact numbers, but I can give a hypothetical example. Let's say we had 600 students over the BM's time there. The number dropped to around under 400. That's a big drop. She tried to remedy that by offering extra classes to get extra money, but her business model sucked. For the extra classes, which were practically nothing more than a lazily thrown together book club, she charged 10,000 won per class. That does nothing. If anything, you're paying the teachers more for those 3 hours to teach than you are making from the class itself. And no, not that many students signed up for it. I guess I can throw one last adjective to describe the BM. incompetent. Let's pivot over to coworkers, i.e. the other English instructors. What are my thoughts on them? They are nice people and are likable on a one-on-one basis. Except for maybe one person, but I'll talk about this certain person later. Now let me tell you a bizarre situation that happened when I just started at the academy with 3 other people who I did training with. 3 girls, and here are their code names. We have Vibe, who always says she likes to go off of the vibes. We have Veggie Burger, who's a vegetarian. And we have Sunshine, as her name is based on the weather. So the 4 of us are joining the academy together. However, there's a 5th person joining the academy as well. I will call him Louis Vuitton because he was into all those designer clothes. So for Louis Vuitton, he did not do training with us in person, as he was one of those people who did their training online. Anyway, he arrives at the academy and he needs to be given a crash course on how to do things there. Because the training we did before this was simply rather irrelevant, as each academy follows their own rules on how they do things. So we had to do extra training at the academy. And from what I heard, Louis Vuitton was struggling quite a bit and needed a lot of help in practice. Anyway, so the first week happens, and one thing all the new instructors had to do was go get a medical check. We did that. Then a day or 2 later, Louis Vuitton talked to me and said that he needed to go back to the clinic as there was some type of issue with his urine sample, which I didn't think too much about. Fast forward to next week, and apparently Louis Vuitton was having issues with his visa and would not be able to work until that got situated. He never came back. Apparently, they said he was being relocated to another academy that can help him with his problem. I'm not really buying the visa story, as my buddy Marvel Rivals had visa issues when he came, but they never did to him what they did to Louis Vuitton. I think it had something to do with that urine sample. Maybe they found something there, who knows. I have my theories, but at the end of the day, it doesn't matter too much. Just a weird situation that happened. Now, let's focus back on the co-workers that are here. Barring one person, everyone was chill for the most part, and I didn't have any major beef with anyone. However, I do have 2 things I want to talk about that I do take issue with. Now, just to preface this, I'm not hating, nor am I intending to attack them on a personal level. This is going to be done in a matter of a fact way of things that I have seen, heard, or dealt with while there. All of which is being presented from my perspective on things, on how I felt about it and how I interpreted it. The first issue I'm going to talk about is the constant complaints. As you know, I spent the past several minutes going into detail about how awful the BM is. Truly the worst. No one liked her, and many of the teachers would vent out their frustrations, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's perfectly fine and reasonable. It only becomes a problem when you keep complaining about it, saying the same old things about her again and again, like she's so disrespectful, she is so stubborn, she is so stupid, she is incompetent, she needs to get fired. Yes, we get it, we all fucking know, but seriously, all the time they're talking about her, and granted the BM does things that merit talking about, but I really don't want to talk about her. Hell, there are times when I avoid going to the teacher's lounge not hear the complaining, and in cases I do go there, I put on AirPods to drown out all the noise. There isn't anything new to say that hasn't already been said. I remember one time I was walking back with Sunshine and Veggie Burger, and the subject of the complaining came up because they were in the same boat with me on all the complaints. I said to them, hot take, all of their complaining about the BM is more annoying than the BM herself. They were surprised to hear me say that, but they didn't disagree with me because at this point we were like 2 months away from our contracts ending, with some people having new jobs at better academies lined up, while others are going back to their home countries. Yet they are still fixated on this, like the BM is living rent-free in their heads. Have any of them not had to deal with a crap boss before? They made an already bad situation worse. Then we get to the petty remarks, like buying durian fruit and hiding it in the BM's office because durian has a very bad smell, wanting to stack chairs in her office, wanting to leave files on the Google Drive to mess with her, all of which I'm assuming are jokes, but make them come off as petty. Like this is the type of thing a high schooler would come up with to a teacher they don't like. So juvenile. I also don't like the fact that some of them were telling the new teachers all the horrible things that happened, and even giving them HR's contact information. This didn't sit well with me. To me, that comes off as poisoning the well. Like you're sabotaging their career experience by telling them all this negative stuff. While yes, I am willing to say this place sucks, and I agree with everything they have said about the BM, I believe the new teachers have the right to make that decision themselves. Besides, there's no guarantee that what we went through will happen to them. But I think the thing that pissed me off the most, and the thing that genuinely made me angry, was the pamphlet incident. Alright, to explain. The BM wanted Migraine to make some pamphlets for summer camp, but she couldn't because she had a Zoom call with HR. So one of the other teachers tells us that we're going to be doing it, saying that we're doing arts and crafts. I hate arts and crafts, and I was rather pissed since I had other work I needed to do. And I was like, this is not our job. One of them was like, yes, it is, which I responded to, no, it is not. This is not in our contract. This is something the Korean staff should have done, yet we're being forced to do it. You want to know what I was told? Shut the fuck up and do it. I was shocked by that. I wanted to lash out, but I chose restraint and complied. I didn't want to rock the boat since it was only a couple weeks left before I could leave this crap hole, but I was seething because of that. Because first off, I was not shouting or yelling. I didn't use any foul language, nor was I speaking in an angry tone. I was stern, and you could tell I was annoyed, but resorting to that without even trying to properly talk me down, all that had to be said was, Faceless, I understand you aren't happy about this. I'm not either. Can you please help us out with this? We would appreciate it. If that would have been said, I would have done it. But I was cussed out instead. I didn't deserve that. Never got an apology for it afterwards either. Then we get to my other thought that I was thinking, and that was, most of these people are hypocrites. They will whine and complain and bitch and moan about everything the BM does. But when they are told to do something that is not in our contract, a common thing that a lot of people like to throw out when we're being forced to do something, they bend the knee without offering any type of resistance. It's fine for them to complain, but when I do it one time about something significant, I'm shut down. The only person who I would say has the right to complain about the BM is Migraine. She was done the worst out of anybody here. Hopefully, everything is going well for her now. She deserves it. Now, let's talk about the second issue I have, and that would be how cliquey the academy was. Simply put, there was a clique amongst certain teachers. That is going to be a natural thing that happens as many of these people have worked together for varying amounts of time, and you're going to gravitate towards and hang out with people you want to. That makes sense. I see the dynamics amongst them, and I think this is a pretty good group. I'm looking forward to hanging out with and interacting with all my colleagues. However, to quote Thanos, reality is often disappointing. Now, I wasn't treated awfully. Everyone was courteous and friendly, but how to put it into words? I wasn't as close to them as I believe we could or should have been. This wasn't a thing exclusive to me, as I noticed this as well with other people as well, particularly those new teachers who started alongside me. Vibe, she was accepted into the clique relatively easily, while everyone else not so much. Allow me to break it down for each person, as each case is different. Sunshine, she was a soloist, and didn't really care to hang out with them outside of work hours, which is fair I suppose, but that was her choice to make. Veggie Burger, from how I look at, she wasn't invited that often, most likely due to the fact she was a vegetarian and most places in our area did not really have vegetarian options. Honestly, I don't know how she was able to manage her food situation in Korea, but she may do. It's funny sometimes. I would joke with her that you don't need to eat anything, just do photosynthesis. So, I can understand why Veggie Burger might not be invited too often. Granted, I disagree with that reasoning, as there are other things to do besides going to get food, but I digress. Then we get to me. Why was I not asked to hang that much? Honestly, I don't have the slightest idea. I could never figure this out. Was it because I don't use social media apps like TikTok and Instagram? I doubt it. No one ever asked if I used either, which I don't. Was it because I was more quiet and closed off? Possible, but yet again, a term later, a new teacher who I'll call Silent Bob, because he was such a quiet person, more so than me, he was invited to join the clique, so I don't think that was the reason either. I'm stumped. Now, with all that said, I'm not going to tell you all that I was never invited to hang because that would be a lie. I have hung out with them on a handful of occasions. However, those invitations I received were more circumstantial, as it was a general invite for everyone, not specifically offered to me, or I happened to be in the room when they were making the plans. Think of it like this. You and a friend are making plans, and one person happened to overhear it, and you kind of feel forced to ask them if they want to go, even though you never intended them to come along. Now, some could say I'm looking too deep into this, but allow me to look at it from a different perspective. If I was never in the room, would any of them seek me out or send a message asking me if I want to join them? The answer to that is no. Most of them would not. Only except for maybe one who I will call FIFA, as he is a big soccer fan. As he would ask me if I want to go get chicken with him. He's a really cool dude. I like him a lot. I regret not hanging out with him as much. Unfortunately, I'm just not that much of a soccer guy. There were a lot of instances where they could talk about cool things they did together, like how they went to the club that weekend, or making plans to go to one of the amusement parks, or a baseball game, or talking about their secret group chats, or going to Busan. One thing that I remember seeing a lot, especially in my first term, was how a lot of them would get coffee together, and I would see them outside the window in the classroom I was teaching in at the time. It reminds me of that SpongeBob meme, where Squidward is in his house looking out the window, staring at SpongeBob and Patrick having fun. I am Squidward. Honestly, it kinda sucks not really getting a chance to do all that. Now, I'm not saying that I demand friendship and I need to be invited to everything. No, hang out with the people you want. If you don't like me, that's fine, but you should at least give me a proper opportunity. I always wanted to go clubbing and bar hopping, something that I was vocal about. None of them invite me to do that. Now, someone might ask, Faceless, if you felt that way, how come you didn't ever tell them about this? If they're as nice as you said they were, I'm sure they would have asked you to come along more often. That is a fair question, but I do have an answer for that. Let's say I talked to them about it, and I start getting invited more often. I would start then to question how genuine they are. Meaning, am I being invited because they want me there, or am I being invited because they feel bad for me? If it's the latter of the two, I would rather be alone than being invited to something out of pity. Sure, they could reassure me saying that is not the case, but the doubt would never go away. I mean, if they never had the desire to actively get me more active, then I don't see them doing so of their own volition. Now, it's not all doom and gloom on the social front, as I did have people to interact with. I had a D&D group that I was able to start. I had my lady friend. Some teachers I was able to confide in, like Veggie Burger and Sunshine at the start, while later on I had new teachers like Marvel Rivals and a married couple from South Africa, who I will dub Mr. and Mrs. South Africa. It was with those three that I finally did some bar hopping. I had a pretty good conversation with them about this very topic, and Mrs. South Africa said something so profound. It touched my literal soul. This is what she told me. We have all left our families, friends, and respective home countries to be here. The people we are working alongside are all that we have. We don't have anyone else. We are each other's new family, our brothers and sisters. I 100% agree with her on that. It should have been like that, like I expected it to be from the start. It's just a shame that it wasn't until my last term, in my last month, that I started to have the experience I wanted from the start. Why couldn't it have been that way from the start? Instead, I just felt like an outsider the entire time. Which is odd because we're all in the same age range and have similar likes. On paper, we should have been thick as thieves. I feel like a puzzle piece that looks like it should fit with the others but doesn't. It's ironic. In my previous job where I was, in fact, a teacher, I couldn't be any more different compared to the other teachers I worked with, as I was the youngest by a large margin and the only guy, while the others were all women who have or had been married, had children. Some of them could have been old enough to be my mother. Some were old enough to even be my grandmother. But the thing is, we got along well. I could open up and have a meaningful conversation with them. Honestly, it was because of those talks with them it led me to working in Korea, so that played a big part in it. With them even reaching out and asking how things were going. That's incredible. I could not imagine the reverse happening. No matter how many times I tried to engage in group talk, I never could properly connect with my coworkers at the academy. As a result, it made me question myself, made me wonder, did I do something wrong? Even though in reality, I didn't. Alright, that tackles the two issues I had regarding my coworkers in Korea. Like I said, I think they are likable and nice people. I won't say anything too negative about them, all things considered, but I did state at the start of that section that there was another coworker who I did not like. Let's talk about Vibe. What is it about her that I don't like? Let's take it from the beginning. Now a question for you, listener. Have you ever had this happen to you, in which you meet someone for the first time, don't know anything about them, yet you get an uneasy feeling around them? As you're unsure about them, they are dubious. I had the feeling with Vibe the first time I saw her in training. And I had this feeling only one other time in Korea, and that was with the BM. Now, this stems from a lot of the actions and things she did that rubbed me the wrong way. I would say the first instance of this would be when she complained to a supervisor about me being too loud while I was teaching, as our rooms are right next to each other. I was not that loud, as many teachers can be heard loud and you can hear them in our classrooms. And if it is in fact an issue, you can just talk to them and be like, hey, you're a bit too loud, can you keep the volume down a bit? Which is a reasonable request. She did not talk to me about it whatsoever, and went straight to a supervisor. And when the supervisor talked to me and told me that, I told him that she is just as loud, if not the loudest person in that hallway, as her class always sounds like a circus. I found it rather disrespectful that she did not come talk to me about this, as this is an issue that could have easily been dealt with by a 1-minute conversation. Then we also have instances of her saying things like that I found bothersome. For example, when I was having a conversation with someone and Vibe also happened to be there, this person asked what I did over the weekend. I responded with, I was hanging out with Marvel Rivals, and we tried out a fast food place we never went to before. It was called Mom's Touch. Vibe straight up said this, you never gone to Mom's Touch before? The way that came off irked me, like she was implying that was such a big deal and I'm a weirdo for not doing it beforehand. There was also another instance in which she did something similar because I was proctoring a student's makeup test and the Korean staff was asking when this student would be done since they needed to know, but they didn't give me the English name. They gave me the Korean name, so I didn't know it was him. And it didn't help that there were other students taking tests that day as well. So I go back to the teacher's lounge because I finished up with the makeup test, and Vibe straight up said, why didn't you read the kid's name from the paper test or something? I respond that I don't know how to read Korean, as I'm not studying it, nor am I interested in learning how to. Just because Vibe chose to study Korean doesn't mean that someone else has to, especially to someone who plans to go back to the States at the end of my contract. Or how about the time when Vibe and I were teaching extra classes, the book club class as I dub it. Now, this was at the time when teachers who did not have a class at certain times could leave early. So I was stuck there with Vibe. Just Vibe. She ignored my existence the entire time. Never really talked on those days, which I'm fine with. Personality-wise, we are polar opposites. She's very extroverted and talkative. I'm more introverted and quiet. Not to mention, I don't think we have anything in common, so what are we going to talk about? Well, this was the first day of that new rule change happened, and nothing of note happened that night. Well, except her locking the teacher's lounge before I got a chance to put my stuff away, and not bother asking if I need to do anything before leaving, but not what I'm focusing on. It's more about what happened the following day. In the teacher's lounge, she's talking to the clique. This is what she told them. Last night was so boring. I had no one to talk to. I was all alone. I was in the back room sitting on the couch playing on my phone. The moment I heard those words come out of her mouth, I just looked up and I was staring daggers. No one noticed, unsurprisingly, but I was pissed. You chose not to interact with me the entire night, yet you're complaining about being alone? Acting like I don't fucking exist? Fuck you! Then we get to our worst action. To give brief context, I had to make a very hard decision about the relationship I was in at the time. It was not an easy decision to make, but it was something that had to be done. So what happened? Vibe was being super nosy and wanted to inquire about my relationship. Not sure how she knew about it. Now, I normally don't tell people that type of information about myself, as that is private, and which is why I often avoid answering those questions. The only reason I would talk about it is either if it is with someone I know, trust, and respect. None of those words apply to Vibe. or in the instance of something reaching its endpoint and there's no point in keeping secrets. Think of it like you're working at a job and you tell that job you're putting in your 2 weeks because you got something new. It's like that type of mentality where you just don't really care anymore because you're at the end stage now. And as a result, that's why I talked. And it doesn't help my case because due to the nature of that choice I had to make, I was not in the best emotional state. So I ended up having a conversation with both Vibe and another person about it. The other person was very empathetic, while Vibe, she seemed more curious than anything else. Even said that she would talk to me next week about the details. Fast forward the next week after ending my relationship, I was a wreck. Physically, I was there. Mentally, I wanted to be somewhere else. And emotionally, I was dead. Yeah, that talk happened where Vibe was prying in. There were certain things I refused to talk about, and that was about it. I was left alone to my own devices. It wouldn't be until a few weeks later, when I was no longer an emotional mess, where I came to a realization that what Vibe did was gross. Very fucking gross. She pried herself into my personal business while I was at rock bottom. Never bothered once to check up on me to see how I was doing. And all for what? For gossip? For drama? Tea? Lore? Whatever it is the kids call it these days? That is messed up. What a despicable action she did. Absolutely horrible. There are other things I could say about Vibe, her being a know-it-all, a try-hard, and is full of herself, but I don't want to talk about her anymore. I've said enough about her. I think you understand what type of person she is, and I have no interest in giving her more of my time than I already have. We are moving on. Okay, so I've gone into detail about many things about my Korea experience. Now to ask the question, how do I feel about it? That's a hard question to answer. For as many negatives as I went over here, there were a good number of positives. My lady friend, the best thing that happened to me in Korea. My D&D group was good. It was rocky at the beginning, as it had someone in the group who I consider a friend, but he was disrespectful to the other players, and particularly to me since I was the DM. But after he left, things picked up and went great. Though I am sort of tempted to detail that story to one of those YouTube channels that talks about D&D horror stories, but I'm up in the air about it. What else happened? Oh, the podcast. That was fun. For those who don't know, I was on the Overachievers podcast where we talked about achievement hunting in video games. I am in the episodes about Skyrim and Infamous. I knew the host IRL. Really good guy. I recommend checking out his channel. One thing I didn't talk about was the food. Food here was great. I never had a bad meal, which I'm honestly quite proud of. I also got pretty addicted to claw machines and gotchas. Spent more money than I really should have on those, but I did snag me some good prizes from those. So yeah, there were good things, but there were also plenty of negatives as well. Things I went into detail about already. Now, I have been asked a few times about why I didn't stay in Korea. There are a couple of answers for it. First being, there was always going to be a glass ceiling here. For foreigners, there's only so far you can realistically go. Mainly being stuck as a teacher, and I don't want to do that forever. Another reason being the distance from being home, not being able to message family and friends easily due to the time zone differences. 14 hours in case we forgot, and everything having to be planned at least a week in advance to at most a month. Then we get to the big reason, and that being I was unhappy. Just to clarify, I wasn't homesick. That was never the issue, but it did miss out on certain things I had which I couldn't bring with me, like my car, my PC, my dog, factoring a job that over time I grew more apathetic for. Granted, I could have chosen to move to a different academy, but there were no guarantees that the new academy would have been better, and I didn't want to risk it. Another thing I had going against me was the loneliness I felt for a good portion of my time here. Now yes, I did have my lady friend and my D&D group and all that, but all those things didn't happen until much later. Not until the back half of my contract, and a lot of the damage had been done already. I think there was only one person who could have convinced me to stay longer, and if she couldn't do it, then nothing would have. I was also dealing with really bad insomnia in my last 4 months, as I could barely sleep at all. So safe to say, I was losing it a little bit. If I were to describe my time in Korea with an analogy, I would like the format like an anime. My first term, being the fall term, is the innocence arc, where I was wide-eyed and had so much optimism. Next term, winter, that is the depression arc, which I come to realize that things were not going to be how I imagined them to be, leading to me questioning things such as, while playing on my PS5 to pass the time because I hated the snow. I would think to myself during that, I could do the exact same thing back in the States. Why did I need to come to Korea to do this? Next term, spring. This is the anger arc, where I was at my most frustrated and annoyed at everything, ranging from the BM and her nonsense, coworkers and the complaints, all the classes I had were obnoxious. Finally, our final term, summer. This is the resentment arc, where I was at my most bitter. This was me at my most unhappiest. At this point, I wanted to leave because I felt like, in my eyes, I felt like I wasted a year of my life here for nothing, which current me disagrees with since I'm a few months removed from that. I did not waste it. At least I did not to that degree past me thought. To answer the question I asked earlier, how do I feel about it? I would say mixed. Or to be more accurate, disappointed. I think what it all boils down towards is that I had a lot of expectations on how I thought my time here was going to go. And it under-delivered in basically every category. Promises were made to me that were never followed up on. There were certain things I never got the chance to do. If I was to rank my time there from a scale of 1 to 10, I would give it a 5. Originally it was going to be a 4, but that last month there was a really good pick-me-up after many of the things that I went through, so I think 5 is as good as I can give it. Will I ever return to Korea? Not impossible, but highly unlikely. Though I would recommend traveling there if you want to take a vacation. Nice places, nice food, nice culture. Would I want to work abroad again? Honestly, I wouldn't mind giving it another shot. Maybe going somewhere different, but not anytime soon. For that time being, I am content with where I am. I think we're at the end, guys, so I hope you enjoyed story time. I know it was a lot to go through. Believe me, I know. I could have talked about so much more than I already did. As there are certain things I left out because it would be redundant. It might be something I forgot about, or it's probably something I would prefer to keep private. I could honestly make a part 2 to this if I wanted, but I don't want to. I've rambled on long enough about this subject, and I want to work on some other videos. The reason I made this video varies. First off, for entertainment, because I like to entertain my audience. Now, some people might say some parts of this are made up. My response to that is, I wish. But I assure to you, my fellow listener, that everything I said in this video is 100% true. But if you are not convinced, all I have to say is, even if you don't believe me, I hope you were entertained nonetheless. Another reason for this video being made was because it was very therapeutic. That therapy joke at the beginning was not a joke. Just to clarify, I am not in therapy, but the act of getting all these feelings off my chest did help me, as I never really let it out. And I think it is important to vent, even if it comes off as utterly unhinged. The final reason was to help people out, because maybe you are considering working abroad, so maybe stories can help you prepare for what you're about to deal with. Granted, my situation was very different compared to others. Some people like their time overseas and choose to stay. Others hate it and want to go back home. I met people on both ends of the spectrum, while for me, I was in the middle, but I don't regret doing it. So if you're planning to work abroad as a teacher or something else altogether, I hope this video and my story helped in some capacity. Maybe. Not to mention, I want to open myself up to the community, as I don't really get to interact with them super heavily or often. Talk about the things that happen behind the scenes. So I hope if you are a subscriber to me, you enjoyed that. Anyhow, let me know what you think. If you have any questions you want to ask me, comment down below. I will try to answer them. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like and subscribe. And next time, I'll catch you all on the flip side.